Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at LA Native American Indian Commission.lacounty.gov. So, so whether you're looking to attract new volunteers, strengthen engagement, or create more sustainable volunteer programs, you're in the right place. Many organizations face a common challenge. Generating interest isn't the hard part, but turning interest into meaningful long-term impact is where the real work begins. A strong volunteer pipeline helps bridge the gap by creating a clear journey from a person's first interaction with the organization to becoming an engaged and committed volunteer. So during today's webinar, we'll explore strategies for attracting the right volunteer, creating effective onboarding experiences, keeping volunteers engaged, and building pathways that encourage long-term involvement and leadership. By the end of the webinar, the goal is for you to walk away with practical ideas and actionable steps to help strengthen volunteer recruitment and retention efforts. So before we talk about building a volunteer pipeline, it's important to understand why it matters. Many organizations face the same challenges. We see high volunteer turnover where people participate once and never return. There's a struggle to fill leadership roles because there isn't a clear pathway for volunteers to grow within an organization. And often there's little intentional volunteer development beyond the recruitment effort. So the reality is the recruitment is only the beginning. Too often organizations invest significant time and energy getting people to sign up, but much less time is designated for when after that happens. So volunteers don't typically leave because they stop caring about the mission or the cause. More often they leave because communication is inconsistent, opportunities don't feel meaningful, or they don't see how they're making a difference. They can feel disconnected from the organization and unsure of where they fit in. This is where a volunteer pipeline creates opportunity. So a strong volunteer pipeline provides a structured journey that moves people from awareness to engagement and ultimately into leadership and advocacy. It creates consistent engagement because volunteers understand their role and their next steps. It builds community ownership because people feel connected to something larger than themselves. It reduces recruitment costs because engaged volunteers stay longer and often bring others with them. And most importantly, it helps develop future leaders. Volunteers are not simply a workforce, they can possibly be your future board members, committee members, advocates, donors, community ambassadors, or community ambassadors of your program. When we intentionally invest in the development, we create greater impact and long-term sustainability for our organizations. As we think about volunteer engagement, every interaction should answer three very important questions for their volunteers. So why does the work matter? How as a volunteer am I contributing? And what happens next? The goal isn't simply to fill volunteer positions. The goal is to build a community of committed supporters who are invested in the mission and are eager to grow within the organization. People don't just join causes, they join communities. They stay because they're finding a purpose. So now let's take a closer look at what a volunteer pipeline actually looks like. So one of the most important concepts to understand what a volunteer engagement is in a journey. People rarely move from hearing about your organization to becoming a passionate advocate overnight. Instead, they progress through a series of predictable stages. The goal of volunteer pipeline is to intentionally guide people through those stages rather than simply hoping they stay involved. So a journey begins with interest. The first point of contact someone sees, it could be a social media post. They could attend an event, receive referrals from a friend, or hear about your organization within the community. Next comes awareness. At this stage, they begin learning more about your mission, values, and the impact your organization creates. They're asking, what does this organization do, and why should I care? From there, they move to exploration. They're considering whether volunteering is a good fit for them. They may visit your website, attend information sessions, ask questions, or review available positions. Once they decide to get involved, they enter onboarding. This is where orientation, training, initial support takes place. A positive onboarding experience builds confidence and helps volunteers feel welcomed and prepared. The next step is going to be engagement. So volunteers begin participating regularly and developing relationships with staff and other volunteers and the people that they serve. As their involvement grows, they move into contribution. At this point, volunteers take greater ownership of their projects, responsibilities, and outcomes. They aren't just showing up, they're making meaningful contributions to the organization's success. Some volunteers will then move into more so leadership roles. These individuals mentor new volunteers, lead teams, coordinate activities, and help strengthen programs. And then finally, the journey leads to advocacy. These volunteers become ambassadors for your organization. They share your mission, recruit others, support fundraising efforts, and campaign your work within the community. What's important to remember is that each stage requires something different from your organization. For new volunteers in the onboarding stage needs for a new volunteer in the onboarding stage, they may need clarity, guidance, and reassurance. An engaged volunteer needs meaningful opportunities and sense of purpose, while emerging leaders need development, mentorship, and increased responsibility. The messaging, support, and success metrics should evolve as volunteers move through your journey within your organization. When organizations recognize these stages and intentionally support people at each one, volunteers' retention improves, leadership capacity grows, and overall impact of the mission expands. So the question isn't simply how do we get more volunteers? The question should be how do we help volunteers take the next steps within their own journey with us? So now that we've introduced the volunteer journey, let's begin the first steps which would be attracting interest. One of the biggest mistakes organizations make is leading with what they need instead of leading with the impact that volunteers can create. So people are rarely motivated by their organizational needs alone. They're inspired by the purpose, connection, and the opportunity to make a difference. So some research shows that volunteers are motivated by a few key factors, which are a sense of purpose, being a part of the community, opportunities for skill development, personal fulfillment, and the ability to make a measurable difference in the lives of others. So when someone decides to volunteer, they're often looking for more than a task to complete. They need help. They want to help others, connect with the community, gain experience, learn new skills, and meet people who share their values and interests. So that's why successful recruitment starts with understanding volunteer motivation rather than focus solely on fulfilling open positions. Sorry. For example, instead of saying we need volunteers for food distribution, consider saying you can help ensure that 50 local families have access to healthy meals this month. So one message focuses on organizational needs, the other focuses on the impact the volunteer can make. Once you've created that message, the next step is getting in front of the right people. So one of the most effective recruitment channels is social media storytelling. Sharing stories that demonstrate impact, highlight volunteers, beneficiaries, and real outcomes. Stories help people emotionally connect with your mission. So community events are another valuable opportunity. Local fairs, festivals, community gatherings, and informational events allow people to meet your team and learn about your organization in a personal way. So building a strong community presence is equally important. Speaking at schools, neighborhood groups, and community meetings helps expand awareness and build trust. Digital outreach can also play a major role. Social media campaigns, emails, newsletters, volunteer spotlights, and short videos featuring volunteers and program participants can help bring your mission to life. So don't underestimate the power of volunteer referrals. Current volunteers are often your best recruiters because they share authentic experiences with friends, family members, and colleagues. People are more likely to get involved when someone they trust invites them to participate. In addition, local partnerships, schools, and universities and corporate volunteer programs can provide access to individuals who are already interested in community engagement and service. As you think about recruitment, remember this best practice focuses on the difference volunteers make, not the positions they need to fill. People respond to purpose. They respond to stories. They respond to opportunity to be a part of something meaningful. And that leads us to a question of reflection. In the chat, can you please answer the following? What motivates people in your community to volunteer? And as you answer this question, understand that the answer is often the first step towards building a stronger and more sustainable volunteer pipeline. Capture and convert interest. Once you've successfully attracted someone's interest, the next challenge is converting that interest into action. This is where many organizations unintentionally lose potential volunteers. Think about it as someone sees your social media post, attends an event, or visits your website. They're really excited about your mission and are ready to get involved. But then they encounter a lengthy application process. They don't hear back for several days, or they're left wondering what's going to happen next. Unfortunately, that's often where the journey ends. So, one of the most important things to remember is interest is fragile. Enthusiasm is the highest in the moment, immediately after someone decides they want to volunteer. If we don't act on the momentum, it could quickly fade. So, some of the most common mistakes organizations make include requiring long applications, delaying responses, and creating complicated onboarding processes that make it difficult for people to take the next step. The good news is that these challenges are often easy to fix. The first best practice to reduce barriers to entry. Ask only So you want to ask only for the information you truly need at the beginning. You can always gather additional information later. If someone is simply showing interest, a short form with basic contact information may be all that's necessary at the moment. Second, make the process mobile friendly. Many people will discover your organization on their phone. If signing up is difficult on a mobile device, you risk losing interested volunteers before they even get started. Third, provide immediate follow-up. As soon as someone expresses interest, they should receive confirmation email or a message acknowledging their interest and thanking them for reaching out. More importantly, they should know exactly what happens next. So clear next steps help eliminate uncertainty. Volunteers should understand that they will be doing, how much will be expected of them, who they will be helping, and when they can expect to hear from someone, which is what brings us to the golden window. The first 24 to 48 hours after someone signs up. This is when enthusiasm is at its highest, when people are more receptive to taking the next step. So this is why it's important for organizations to follow up, usually within the 24 hours or whenever possible. Make contact within 24 hours of receiving an inquiry. Even if you don't have all the details yet, a simple welcome message lets the individual know they're valued and that their interest matters. Remember, volunteers don't compare your organization to other nonprofits. They compare their experience to every other interaction they have online. They're accustomed to receiving immediate responses, confirmations, and clear instructions. The easier you make it to say yes, the more likely people are to continue moving through your volunteer journey. So recruitment creates interest, responsive follow-up turns interest into engagement. Once someone has said yes to volunteering, the next step is going to be onboarding. In fact, onboarding experience often determines whether a volunteer stays involved quietly disappears after the first interaction. Think about your own experience joining an organization, workplace, or group. The first day shapes your perception of where you belong, whether you understand what's expected of you, and whether you want to continue. So the same is for future volunteers. Effective onboarding is about turning curiosity into commitment. It's about helping volunteers move from being interested in your mission to feeling personally connected to it. A great onboarding experience begins with a warm welcome. This can be as simple as a personal phone call, email, or message that thanks them for joining and lets them know they're valued. People want to know that they're more than just another name on a volunteer list. The welcome stage should also introduce volunteers to your mission, help them understand why your organization exists and what community needs you're addressing, and how volunteers play a critical role in creating impact. Next would be the orientation. So this is where volunteers learn the basics of the organization and the expectations of their role and how they fit into the bigger picture. It's important to provide clarity and around responsibilities, time commitments, policies, and communication channels. So one of the quickest ways to lose a volunteer is to leave them unsure about what's expected of them. So training is also a key component of onboarding. Volunteers should receive the knowledge, resource, and role-specific skills they need to feel prepared and successful. If there are safety procedures, tools, and systems, they'll be using them, and how they'll be using them. Now is the time to introduce them. Onboarding isn't just about information, it's about building that first connection or building that connection. People often say because of the relationship they build, introduce new volunteers to staff members, team leaders, and fellow volunteers. Help them feel a part of the community from the very beginning. And finally, provide a meaningful first assignment. So, when possible, start with a low risk opportunity that allows volunteers to experience success quickly, give them a chance to contribute, build confidence, and see the impact of their efforts right away. Think of it as creating an early win. So by the end of the onboarding process, every volunteer should be able to say the three things. I understand my role, I feel welcomed, and perhaps the most important thing would be I want to come back. So when volunteers leave their first experience feeling confident, connected, and valued, they're much more likely to continue moving through the pipeline towards deeper engagement, leadership, and advocacy. The goal of onboarding isn't simply to share information. The goal is to create confidence, belonging, and commitment. Once a volunteer has completed onboarding, our focus shifts early to engagement. This stage is all about building momentum during the first 90 days. Um, and you may ask why 90 days? Well, that is because the first few months are often when volunteers decide whether they will become long-term contributors, or quietly drift away. If you can successfully engage volunteers during this period, you can successfully increase the likelihood they will remain involved over time. During the first 90 days, volunteers are evaluating their experience just as much as you're going to be evaluating them in their participation. Most new volunteers are asking themselves four important questions. Do I belong here? Am I making a difference? Does anyone know me? And is my time being valued? If those questions go unanswered, volunteers could begin to feel disconnected, uncertain, or unimportant, even if they care deeply about the mission. So that's why intentional engagement is so critical. One effective strategy is assigning a volunteer mentor. A mentor serves as a peer guide who can answer questions, offer encouragement, and help new volunteers navigate organizations. Having a trusted point of contact builds confidence and helps volunteers feel supported from the start. Another important strategy is creating quick wins. So give volunteers opportunities to experience success early in the journey. When people can see the impact of their efforts right away, they develop a stronger sense of purpose and commitment. So regular communication is also equally as important. You don't want to wait until there's a problem to check in. You want to schedule touch points during the first few weeks and months. A simple conversation can uncover concerns, answer questions, and reinforce the volunteers' contribution matters. Early engagement is also helping volunteers build relationships. People often join an organization because of the mission, but they stay because of the connections that they make. So look for ways to build community through group projects, team meetings, volunteer gatherings, and opportunities for collaboration. The stronger the relationship, the stronger the retention. It's also very important to remember to have clear responsibilities. Volunteers should understand that they're expected. Volunteers should understand what they're expected to do, how their work contributes to organization goals, and where they can go for support. Clarity creates confidence, and confidence leads to greater engagement. As an organization, you should sometimes measure volunteer success by hours served. But at this stage, one of the most important metrics to track is 90-day retention rate. Many volunteers who sign up are still active. So, for example, um, how many volunteers who have signed up are still active after 3 months? The number can tell you a great deal about effectiveness of your onboarding and engagement efforts. You also want to remember volunteers who feel welcomed, connected, valued, and successful during the first 90 days are much more likely to continue their journey towards greater contribution, leadership, and advocacy. The goal of early engagement is simple: help volunteers feel that they belong and that their time truly matters. Mm. So once volunteers are engaged, the next step is helping them move from participation to ownership. Meaningful contribution is the point where volunteers begin to see themselves not just as people who complete tasks, but as valued partners who help move the mission forward. People stay when they can see that their efforts matter. While tasks are an important part of volunteering, most people are looking for something deeper. They want to understand their purpose, take on meaningful responsibility, and see the impact of their work. This means organizations need to think beyond simple assigning tasks. You need to create opportunities where volunteers can contribute their skills, ideas, and leadership. There are several ways to increase volunteer ownership. First is provide responsibility. Give volunteers opportunities to take ownership of projects, activities, or areas of work. This could be coordinating an event, leading a project team, or helping manage a specific initiative. Second could be by creating opportunities for anatomy. As volunteers gain experience, allow them to make decisions, offer input, and contribute ideas. When people feel trusted, they become more invested in the success of the organization. Third, you want to provide skill building opportunities. Volunteers often bring valued skills and experiences, and they also want opportunities to learn and to grow. Consider creating specialized roles that match volunteers' strengths while also helping them develop new abilities. Examples of meaningful contribution might include supporting event coordination, leading a community outreach effort, managing a volunteer project, helping improve program or services. The key is creating pathways where volunteers can increase their level of involvement over time. Another important piece of ownership is helping volunteers see the impact of their contribution. Sometimes we assume volunteers understand the difference that they're making, but that may not always be the full picture. Sharing outcomes, stories, and data help connect their efforts to a larger mission. So, for example, instead of simply saying, "Thank you for volunteering at our food distribution event," you might want to say, "Your team helped provide meals for 500 families this quarter." So, the connection between action and impact is powerful. When volunteers understand the results of their work, they develop a stronger sense of purpose and commitment. So, as you think about your own volunteer program, please consider this question. Do your own volunteers know the impact of their contribution? So when you think of your answer, if the answer is unclear, that might be an opportunity to strengthen communication and create moments where your volunteers can see the difference that they are making. So the goal is to help volunteers move from asking, "What tasks do you need me to complete?" to saying, "How can I help advance this mission?" Once the volunteers begin making meaningful contributions, the next steps is helping them continue to grow. So volunteer development is about creating pathways that allow volunteers to build skills, deepen their connection to the mission, and take on greater levels of responsibility over time. One of the biggest reasons volunteers stay engaged is because they continue learning and growing. People want to know that their time is not only making a difference for the community, but also helping them develop personally and professionally. So development pathways create opportunities for volunteers to expand their ability to prepare for future roles within the organization. One area of growth is skills training. Volunteers can develop practical skills that benefit both the organization and their own personal growth. This may include communication, leadership, project management, facilitation, teamwork, and advocacy skills. For example, a volunteer who starts helping at events may eventually develop skills to coordinate an entire project on their own, lead a team of volunteers, or represent the organization within the community. Another important area is mission education. Volunteers become stronger ambassadors when they understand not only what the organization does, but why it matters. Providing education about community needs, industry trends, and organizational strategies. The issues your organization addresses helps volunteers become more informed and connected to the mission. Mission education also helps volunteers move from participants to advocates because they can confidently share the story of the organization's impact. The third area is professional growth. Many volunteers are looking for opportunities to strengthen their skills, build confidence, and expand their networks. Consider offering workshops, certifications, mentoring opportunities, networking events, or access to additional learning resources. These opportunities create value for volunteers while also strengthening organization capacity. When we invest in volunteer development, everyone benefits. Volunteers become more confident, capable contributors. Organizations build a stronger base of experienced supporters. And over time, volunteers can become future leaders, program champions, board members, and community advocates. The goal is to not just retain volunteers, it's to help them reach their full potential within the mission. As you think about your own organization, please answer the following question in the chat. What skills could volunteers gain through service with the organization? As you answer this question, the answer can help identify new ways to create development pathways and turn volunteer involvement into a meaningful growth experience. So at this stage in the volunteer journey, we move from engagement and development into one of the most important opportunities for long-term sustainability, which would be building a leadership pipeline. A stronger volunteer leads, as stronger volunteer leaders rarely appear by accident, leadership should be identified, encouraged, and developed intentionally. Many organizations have volunteers who are already demonstrating leadership qualities, but without a clear pathway, those individuals um, may never have the opportunity to grow into leadership roles. A volunteer leadership pipeline creates a progression where individuals can gradually increase their skills, confidence, and responsibility over time. The journey may begin with a volunteer participant. This is someone who is learning about the organization, contributing to activities, and building their connection to the mission. From there, volunteers may move into team volunteer role, where they become more consistent contributors and begin supporting others. The next is a lead volunteer. At, at this level, volunteers begin taking ownership of specific activities, mentoring new volunteers, or helping coordinate efforts. As they continue to grow, they may step into new roles like volunteer coordinator, where they help organize programs, manage teams, and serve as a bridge between staff and volunteers. Ultimately, some volunteers may move to advisory or board leadership, bringing their experience, passion, and community perspective into higher level decision-making roles. The key is to create opportunities for volunteers to take the next step. One strategy is shadowing opportunities. Allow emerging volunteers to observe experienced volunteers, staff members, and organizational leaders so they can better understand what leadership looks like in practice. Another strategy is mentorship. Developing leaders with experienced volunteers or staff provides guidance, encouragement, and support as they take on new responsibilities. Organizations can also use stretch assignments. These are opportunities that gently challenge volunteers to grow, such as leading a meeting, coordinating a small project, training a new volunteer, or helping solve a program challenge. Leadership training is another valuable tool, providing education around community, team management, facilitation, and decision making. Um, Helps volunteers feel prepared and confident as they step into new roles. When identifying potential leaders, look for volunteers who demonstrate initiative, reliability, commitment to the mission, and the ability to positively influence others. The long-term benefit of leadership pipeline is significant. Developing volunteer leaders reduces organization dependent on staff alone and creates a stronger and more sustainable foundation for the future. A successful volunteer program doesn't just create participants, it creates leaders. So now that we discussed how to develop and grow volunteers, the next step is making sure that they stay engaged long term. So recognition and retention go hand in hand. Volunteers are more likely to continue giving their time when they feel appreciated, connected, and confident that their contributions are making a difference. One of the most important things to remember is that recognition is not just about saying thank you, it's about reinforcing the value of volunteers' time and effort. So volunteers want to know, do I matter here? Is my contribution making a difference? And does the organization appreciate what I bring? What keeps volunteers engaged over time often comes down to key factors: feeling appreciated, building meaningful relationships, seeing impact of their work, opportunities for personal growth, and having flexibility that allows volunteers to fit into their lives. Effective recognition could take many forms. Some recognition is informal. It could be a personal thank you message, a quick handwritten note, a conversation after an event, or publicly acknowledging someone's contribution. Um, all this can have a significant impact. Another form of recognition could be more formal, such as volunteer awards, appreciation events, milestone celebrations, or recognizing programs that highlight long-term commitment. Another powerful approach is impact recognition. So instead of only thanking volunteers for what they did, show them what their efforts have achieved. So for example, rather than saying thank you for helping, consider saying your support helped 25 students complete their mentoring session this semester. The second message connects the volunteers' actions to a meaningful outcome, and it reminds them that their time created a real change. So organizations can also strengthen retention by creating opportunities for volunteers to continue building relationships and growing. So volunteer spotlights, impact reports, team gatherings, and opportunities to share feedback all reinforce the sense of belonging. So it's important. The most important principle is that recognition should be frequent, authentic, and specific. Volunteers don't need recognition to be elaborate. They don't need it to be. They only need it to be genuine. They want to know that someone notice their efforts and understand the difference that they've made. When volunteers feel valued, connected, and aligned with their mission, they are much more likely to continue the journey from participant to leadership to advocacy. Um, At the final stage of the volunteer journey, we reach the ultimate goal, which would be creating volunteer advocates. Advocates happen when volunteers move beyond participating in the mission and begin actively campaigning for it. They become ambassadors who share their experience, inspire others to get involved, and help expand the organization's impact. The most engaged volunteers don't just support the work, they help tell the story of why the work matters. So volunteer advocates can play many important roles. They can recruit others by inviting friends, family members, and colleagues to get involved. They can share stories about their experience, the impact that they've witnessed. They can help raise awareness, support fundraising efforts, and represent the organization within the community. This stage is powerful because volunteers bring something organizations cannot create on their own, which would be authentic personal stories. People are people are more often likely to trust and connect with the message when it comes from someone who has experienced the mission firsthand. So to create volunteer advocates, organizations need to provide the right tools and opportunities. One strategy is providing shareable impact stories, give volunteers example of success stories, community outcomes, and program highlights they can confidently share with others. Another strategy is creating ambassador programs. Experienced volunteers can receive additional training to represent the organization at a community event, speak about the mission, welcome new volunteers, or help build partnerships. Then you also have referral programs, which are another effective approach. Your current volunteers are often your strongest recruiters because they can explain what makes the experience meaningful and encourage others to join. Organizations can also create alumni networks to maintain relationships with former volunteers. Even when people step away from active volunteering, they can still continue supporting the mission as advocates, donors, connectors, and or become future volunteers again. The impact of volunteer advocates goes beyond individual participation. Advocates help create a self-sustaining volunteer pipeline where engaged volunteers become the source of future volunteers. They help move the organization from constantly searching for new support to building a growing community of people who believe in the mission and want others to be a part of it. The ultimate goal is not just to have volunteers who serve, the goal is to have volunteers who become champions of the mission. So as you think of your own organization, consider this following question. How can we empower our volunteers to become ambassadors of our mission? So as you answer the question, it may reveal opportunities to strengthen engagement, expand your reach, and build stronger volunteer communities for the future. All right. So throughout the webinar, we've explored the volunteer journey, how organizations can intentionally move from initial interest to lasting impact. This final framework brings all those stages together. So the first step is to attract. This is where we inspire interest. We connect with people through meaningful stories, community presence, and opportunities that show them how they can make a difference. Next is to engage. This is where we create belonging. When someone expresses interest, we need to help them feel welcomed, connected, and valued. Are people more likely to stay involved when they develop relationships and feel like they are part of a community? The next step is development, where we build skills and confidence. Volunteers want opportunities to learn, grow, and take a new challenge. By providing training, mentorship, and development opportunities, we help volunteers become stronger contributors. Then we have empower, where we provide ownership. This is a transition from simply completing tasks to taking meaningful responsibility. Volunteers become more invested when they have opportunities to lead projects, share ideas, and influence the work. Then you have the next step, which is recognition, where we celebrate contributions. Recognition reinforces that volunteers matter and their efforts create real impact. When we consistently acknowledge and appreciate volunteers, we strengthen commitment and retention. And finally, we have elevate. So creating leaders and advocates. At this stage, volunteers become champions of the mission. They mentor others, share the organization's story, recruit new supporters, and help expand the community's impact. When organizations intentionally support volunteers through each stage, something powerful happens. You move from simply managing volunteers to building a sustainable volunteer ecosystem. So a sustainable volunteer ecosystem is one of where the volunteers' interest becomes meaningful engagement. Engagement becomes leadership, and leadership becomes lasting community impact. And the goal is not just to have more volunteers. The goal is to build a community of supporters who grow your organization and help advance the mission for years to come. So thank you all for joining us today and for your thoughtful participation throughout the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we could go ahead and answer them now. Okay. If there is no questions at this time, oh, there is? Okay. Sorry. Yes, go ahead, Bishop. Um, all right.
Will we get a
Yes.
copy of the presentation?
Yes, so the webinar is going to be uploaded to the website for you guys to have. It should be up by Monday.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. If there's some. Yes, Alicia? Or Chelsea, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. You can hear me, right? Perfect.
Yes.
I know you were saying that attendance is usually a way to check how many, like, retention for our volunteers, but it would be different for like the 90-day type of retention. What are some ways of like checking besides attendance within those 90 days? Would it just be doing those check-ins with the volunteers and seeing if they're still interested? Or
Yeah, so when checking to see if you're maintaining your volunteer retention, so apart from the 90 days, yes, so you want to do like maybe like a weekly check-in with them just to see where they're at, if they have any questions, if they have any concerns about the program, or if they're unclear with their current responsibilities. So a lot of the time, just to maintain your retention, it's just a clear communication with your volunteers. If that is through a text message or an email or through your preferred form of contact, a lot of the times that's the best way to understand and get a feel of where they're at. If for some reason they're not very responsive, just kind of like maybe in the next community event, give them um, like kind of just not necessarily pull them to the side, but do ask them like a little bit of the feedback. You may even want to share a survey, like a volunteer survey that you could create to see in different ways that you guys can improve your volunteer program, to see what exactly your volunteers need.
okay. Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. Thank you so much.
you're welcome. Is there any other questions that I could answer? All right. Well, if there's no more questions at this time, but if you do have questions in the future, feel free to reach out to your grant advocate or to the TA technical assistance team at TA TPA. And we'll go ahead and give you an answer. Thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.